Most kids get gifts from their parents or friends. In 8th grade, I started getting them from my history teacher, Mr. Harrison. It started with a pencil, then a book, but then the gifts got specific. He gave me a keychain of my favorite obscure band. He gave me a single perfect seashell the day after my family's private trip to the beach. The final gift was my own house key, which he claimed he found on my street. This isn't just a story about a creepy teacher. It's about how the person you're supposed to trust the most can become the one you fear is watching you sleep.
Mr. Harrison was, by all accounts, the perfect teacher. He was young, charismatic, and made 8th grade history feel like an epic movie. He was the kind of teacher everyone wanted, the one who remembered your name on the second day and actually listened when you spoke. Our school was in a small, sleepy town where everyone knew each other's business, and Mr. Harrison fit right in, becoming a beloved community figure in his first year. He had this easygoing smile and a way of making every student feel like he was his favorite. Looking back, I realized that was the first part of the trap. His manufactured charm was a camouflage, a carefully constructed persona designed to disarm us, our parents, and the entire school. He wasn't just a good teacher, he was a masterful predator who had chosen the perfect hunting ground, a place filled with impressionable kids who craved validation from adults.
The special attention started subtly. "Great answers, Sarah," he'd say, his eyes lingering a little too long. "You have a real gift for this." I was a shy kid, and the praise was intoxicating. I started participating more, staying after class to ask questions. That's when the first gift appeared, a brand new copy of a historical novel he'd mentioned. "I saw it at the bookstore and thought of you," he said, waving off my thanks. It felt special, but not yet strange. Soon, however, the compliments shifted from my schoolwork to my appearance. "That's a new haircut, isn't it? It frames your face nicely." Or, "That blue sweater really brings out your eyes." My friends were jealous, teasing me about being the teacher's pet. And a part of me was flattered. But another part, a small, cold knot in my stomach, had begun to feel a persistent, creeping unease. The line between encouraging and obsessive was starting to blur, and I was standing right on it.
The gifts became more personal and far more unnerving. One Monday, he placed a small box on my desk. Inside was a silver keychain for a niche indie band I adored, a band I'd only ever listened to on my headphones and never discussed at school. "How did you know I liked them?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. He just smiled his easy smile. "A good teacher pays attention to his students' interests," he replied vaguely. The explanation felt hollow, sinister. How was he paying attention? Was he looking at my social media, which was private? A few weeks later, after my family took a weekend trip to a secluded beach 2 hours away, he gave me a small, beautiful conch shell. "I bet you didn't find one this perfect," he said with a wink. The cold knot in my stomach turned to ice. There was no way he could have known we were there. The flattery had curdled into fear. I wasn't his student anymore. I was his project.
The final, undeniable proof came on a cold Tuesday morning. I was walking to my locker when Mr. Harrison intercepted me, his expression a mask of feigned concern. "Sarah, thank goodness I found you," he said, holding something in his palm. "I was jogging this morning and saw this on the sidewalk near your house. I recognized it from when you dropped your bag once." He opened his hand. It was my house key, attached to my distinctive fluffy cat keychain. I hadn't even realized it was missing. My blood ran cold. I lived on a quiet cul-de-sac, not on any main jogging route. He hadn't just found it, he had to have been there, on my street, watching. "You should be more careful," he added, his voice low and intimate. "A girl like you needs someone looking out for her." The threat was no longer veiled. He wasn't just watching, he was letting me know he could get closer whenever he wanted. That night, I told my parents everything. I laid out the gifts, the timeline, the comments, the key. At first, my dad was skeptical. "Are you sure you're not misreading this, honey? Mr. Harrison is such a great guy." It was the most frustrating part. His public mask was so perfect that my reality seemed like a childish fantasy. But my mom saw the genuine terror in my eyes. She saw the collection of strange, intimate gifts I had hidden in a box under my bed. The next morning, she went with me to the principal's office. She didn't ask, she demanded. She laid out the evidence, her voice shaking with rage. The principal, a man who had praised Mr. Harrison at every assembly, sat there looking stunned. It was my word, a 19-year-old girl's word, against the school's star teacher. But the physical evidence of the gifts was undeniable.
An investigation was launched. Mr. Harrison was immediately put on administrative leave. We found out later that they discovered a folder on his spool computer filled with photos of me, photos he had taken from a distance during school events, along with detailed notes about my schedule, my friends, and my habits. He was fired, and thanks to my parents pressing charges for stalking, was issued a restraining order. He moved out of town before the court date, but the story doesn't end there. For years, I felt his presence everywhere. Every time I saw a car that looked like his, my heart would stop. I became terrified of praise, suspicious of kindness. He didn't just steal my sense of safety, he stole my ability to trust. He taught me the most terrifying history lesson of all, that monsters don't always have fangs and claws. Sometimes they have a warm smile and a pocket full of gifts.
My high school art teacher, Ms. Albright, had one rule. No one was ever allowed in the old janitor's closet at the back of her classroom. Ever. We figured she'd just stored supplies in there. But some days, after school, you could hear a strange sound coming from it. A low, persistent buzzing, almost like an electric razor, or a tattoo gun. This is the story of the day I got locked in after class and found out what our art teacher was really creating in that closet. It wasn't painting, and it wasn't sculpture.
Miss Albright was not your typical art teacher. In a department known for its bohemian, free-spirited instructors, she was a specter of cold efficiency. She was a tall, severe woman who wore exclusively black, high-necked blouses and tailored slacks, her dark hair always pulled back in a ruthlessly tight bun. She never smiled. She didn't praise your work, she critiqued its structural failings.
Her classroom, usually a place of chaotic creativity, was run with militaristic precision. Canvases were stored at perfect right angles, brushes were cleaned until they shone, and there was absolutely no talking during studio time. We were all terrified of her. Her presence was like a pocket of cold air in the otherwise warm and bustling school hallways. She wasn't just distant, she was distant, as if she was observing us all from behind a thick pane of glass, her dark eyes missing nothing.
The closet was the classroom's central mystery. It was an old, heavy oak door at the very back of the room, with a tarnished brass knob and a keyhole. It was a remnant from when the school was first built, a forgotten janitor's supply closet. Miss Albright's only explicit, repeated rule, announced on the first day of every semester, was that the closet was off limits. It contains hazardous chemicals for glazing and is structurally unsound. Entry is forbidden, she would state in her flat, monotone voice. The threat was enough to keep most students away, but it also made the closet an object of intense speculation and legend. Some kids said it was haunted. Others joked she kept a failed art project in there. But the truth, as it often is, was far stranger and more sinister than any ghost story we could have imagined.
The clues were there, if you knew where to look. A faint antiseptic smell, like a hospital, would sometimes linger in the air near the back of the room, quickly masked by the scent of turpentine. Miss Albright often stayed late, hours after the last student had gone home. We'd see the light in her classroom window from the football field during evening practice. And then there was the buzzing. It was rare, but a few of us who stayed late for art club heard it, a low, steady electric hum from behind the closet door. My friend Jake was convinced she was secretly a luthier, repairing electric guitars. I thought she might be using some kind of weird power tool for sculpting. We were both naively, laughably wrong. The sound was organic to her secret, a critical piece of the horrifying puzzle we were about to stumble into.
One Thursday, I was finishing a project and lost track of time. The final bell had rung 30 minutes earlier. When I went to leave, I realized Ms. Albright had locked the main classroom door from the outside, assuming the room was empty. I was trapped. Panic set in, but then I saw it. In her haste to leave, she had left the old janitor's closet door slightly ajar. The mystery was too powerful to resist. Pushing the heavy door open, I wasn't met with shelves of clay or chemicals. The small space had been converted into a sterile makeshift clinic. A reclining medical chair sat in the center, with a bright surgical lamp positioned over it. On a steel tray next to it were needles, ink bottles, sterile gauze, and what was unmistakably a professional tattoo gun. Taped to the wall were dozens of Polaroid photos of bruised, blooded skin, showcasing fresh, intricate tattoos, gang symbols I recognized from the rougher side of town.
My blood ran cold. Ms. Albright wasn't just an art teacher. She was a scratcher, an unlicensed tattoo artist. But this was something more. The photos weren't just of tattoos. They showed her stitching up what looked like knife wounds, setting broken fingers with makeshift splints. The closet wasn't just an illegal tattoo parlor. It was an underground clinic for local gang members. She was their private medic and artist, patching them up after fights and marking them with their allegiances, all under the cover of a quiet high school art classroom. The hazardous chemicals, the late nights, the antiseptic smell, it all clicked into place. She was using the school as a base for a criminal operation, a neutral ground where violent people could get medical care without involving the authorities. The art she was creating wasn't for a gallery. It was on the skin of dangerous men.
I found a fire alarm pool station in the hallway and yanked it, using the ensuing chaos to escape the building undetected. The next day, an anonymous tip was called in to the police department from a payphone. When I came to school the following Monday, Miss Albright was gone. A substitute was in her place, and the administration gave a vague statement about her leaving for personal reasons. The closet door was sealed shut with a new padlock. No one ever spoke of it again. But I can't unsee what I saw. I learned that day that the quietest, most unassuming people can lead the most terrifying double lives. Now, whenever I see a teacher who seems a little too private, a little too cold, I can't help but wonder, what secrets are they hiding in their closet?
My 6th grade social studies teacher, Mr. Gable, had a smile. It was a wide, toothy, perfect smile, and it never, ever left his face. It was there when he was yelling at a student. It was there when he announced a pop quiz. And it was there on the day a kid in the front row had a seizure. While we were all panicking, Mr. Gable just stood at the front of the class, watching with that same placid, terrifying smile. It wasn't a friendly smile, it was a mask, and I was terrified of what was underneath it. Mr. Gable was a large man, built like a retired football player, which made his constant, unwavering smile all the more unsettling. It was a stark, bizarre contrast, like a cartoon character's head pasted onto a real person's body. He taught social studies in room 204, a classroom that always felt a few degrees colder than the rest of the school. The air in there was thick with a kind of quiet, nervous tension. We were all equally frightened and awkward, still navigating the awkward transition to middle school. And Mr. Gable's classroom was a psychological minefield. Learning was secondary. The primary goal in his class was survival. His smile was the sun in this terrifying solar system. Everything revolved around it, and we were all just tiny, scared planets, trying desperately to stay in our orbits and avoid being burned.
His teaching methods were a form of psychological warfare. The rules would change on a whim. One day, raising your hand was mandatory. The next, he would ignore anyone with a raised hand, his smile fixed until someone finally broke the rule and shouted an answer, only to be punished for being disrespectful. He'd assign group projects with deliberately incompatible students, then sit back and watch the inevitable arguments and tears, his grin never faltering. He seemed to feed on our anxiety and discomfort. He never yelled in anger. He'd deliver his reprimands in a calm, cheerful tone, the smile making his cruel words feel even more vicious. That's a very creative answer, Mark, if the goal was to be completely, utterly wrong, he'd say, chuckling softly as the class squirmed.
The most infamous incident was the trust experiment. He brought in an old heavy globe from the library and had a small, nervous boy named Kevin stand in the middle of the room. He then told the rest of us to line up and one by one toss the globe to Kevin. The catch was Kevin had to close his eyes. It was a disaster waiting to happen. Kids were nervous. Their throws were clumsy. The globe bounced off the wall. It hit the floor with a loud thud. All the while, Mr. Gable stood by, his hands clasped behind his back, a serene, beaming smile on his face. The experiment ended when the globe slipped from a girl's sweaty hands and shattered on the floor near Kevin's feet. Without a single change in his expression, Mr. Gable simply said, "Well, I guess that proves my point about trust," and then assigned us all an essay on the topic.
The breaking point for me, and for many others, came during a test review. Mr. Gable was asking impossibly obscure questions, and the class was silent, paralyzed with fear. A girl named Jessica, who was a straight A student, finally broke down. She started crying, her shoulders shaking. "I don't know," she sobbed. "I can't do this." A normal teacher would have shown compassion. Mr. Gable's smile somehow seemed to widen. He tilted his head, his eyes gleaming. "Ah," he said, his voice full of mock wonder. "The beautiful sound of a mind reaching its limit. That is the sound of learning, Jessica." He looked around the room at the rest of our horrified faces, his grin a rictus of pure sadistic pleasure. He wasn't just a bad teacher, he was enjoying our suffering.
That was the final straw. That evening, my mom called Jessica's mom. They called 2 other parents. An army of furious mothers and fathers descended upon the principal's office the next day. They all told the same stories of the mind games, the bizarre punishments, the constant, unnerving smile. The principal, who had likely only ever seen Mr. Gable's professional, charming side, was overwhelmed. For the first time, it wasn't just one kid's complaint. It was a pattern of disturbing, psychologically abusive behavior, corroborated by nearly a dozen families. The wall of deniability that Mr. Gable had built around himself finally began to crumble. Mr. Gable was quietly removed from the classroom a week later. They told us he had transferred to another district. Years later, I ran into my old science teacher at a grocery store, and I asked her what really happened to him. She looked around nervously, then leaned in and whispered, "He didn't get transferred. He came to us from a special teaching program, one for instructors who had difficulties at previous schools. The administration had to send him back to the institution that sponsored him. He wasn't just a creep. He was an unstable individual who had been placed in a position of power over children. That smile wasn't a mask for cruelty. It was a symptom of a deep, profound wrongness. To this day, I get a cold feeling in my stomach when I see someone with a smile that doesn't quite reach their eyes.